So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. What if Naruto manipulated whole Konoha village and became immortal evil god? Movie 2. Arrow's 3 genin came across one of the teams from Rain 30 minutes after entering the Forest of Death. They seemed not to notice the grass team as they began a watch. The team exchanged hand seals as they debated a plan. Number 2 was in favor of spilling a little blood. However, it was number 3, the steam user, who suggested something more subtle and far less likely to give away their position in the forest. Number 1 laid a genjutsu to keep the rain ninja wandering in circles. That was fun to watch. Number 2 mixed up a mild hallucinogenic poison that would take a week or longer to exit their systems. She looked a bit cross that she wouldn't be allowed to cause anyone's arm to rot off or anyone's appendix to burst. Number 3 collected the sealed poison vial from number 2 and gave the kunoichi a hard look. He just hoped that she hadn't prepared a distillation of sarin or something equally lethal to spite numbers 1 and 3. After finally deciding the poison was what they had asked for, number 3 timed his throw and sent the vial high into the air, a high arcing curve designed to put the vial over its 3 targets. When it was just a few feet above all 3 of the rain ninja, number 3 sent a small focused blast of steam. The vial cracked and rained down the poison. Within moments, one hit the ground shaking. The others started attacking each other. They were simple to disarm and incapacitate using nerve clusters after that. The grass genin threw tree branches over their still breathing victims and counted it as a success. It was easier than going fishing with a stack of exploding notes. They'd been given a heaven scroll before the gates to this exam begun. With this attack, they recovered an earth scroll 40 minutes into the exam. It was good. They looked forward to discussing the operation in the after-action conference with number 4. The only thing he could scold them for was putting together the plan too slowly and arguing too much about it. Now the question was, what next? A few hand signals between Tero's genin settled the question. And the tester continue. They'd remain in the forest a bit longer, deal with a few other competitors, gauge up the people who might actually be tough. Number 1 led them deeper into the forest, knowing that a team from Waterfall had entered not too far from where he and 2 and 3 had entered. Unfortunately for that plan, the lone team from Sand was already slaughtering the easy marks from Waterfall, slaughtering, literally. The short redhead had total control of Sand and a total lack of sanity. The genin stayed hidden until well after the Suna genin passed away. With hand seals, they compared notes. Number 1. Red boy on a whole other level. Would steam hurt him? 3. Number 3. Don't want to find out. Girl was wind user. Could push steam back in my face. Number 2. My jutsu go through wine fine. Number 4 has tested extensively. Number 3. What about painted boy? Number 1. Curious bundle on back. Maybe puppet user who hasn't learned any storage sealing. Number 4 lectured on strengths and weaknesses. Likely into deception and hiding. Number 2. Let's get away from redhead now. Don't want to see the desert funeral thing again. The trio encountered 3 more teams and trapped their minds and poisoned them without ever being detected. They sealed the unneeded scrolls they recovered into leaves or other forest detritus. It was a standard battle tactic, at least standard as far as their teacher had instructed them. Denial and destruction of critical resources. They were beginning to think about heading for the tower when they felt more of the chakra from the cemetery, the snake Sanin's chakra. This time it wasn't a little bit, the ninja was throwing around some massive techniques. He had come into the forest then, even after number 4 had warned the Konoha officials. Number 4 had been right so far and that the Sanin hadn't come to see them again. What was he here for during a test of simple genin? None knew. All 3 would admit to at least being nervous. None would own up to feeling sheer terror. Number 2. Number 4 was right. These people are fools. Train up powerful shinobi without regard to whether they're at all sane. Number 1. Don't need a lecture. 2. Need a plan. Stay in forest overnight or head to tower. Number 3. I don't care to face that freak again. Hess throwing around chakra now that would take us down in seconds. We survived yesterday because he was trying to be sneaky. Number 2. Fine. Tower, here we come. They encountered only a single additional team in the forest on their way to the central building. The all-Kunoichi team from T-Country was poisoned without incident, their scrolls sealed and hidden. They arrived safely just after midnight. They unsealed their scrolls and were greeted by a leaf chunin moments later. They stopped on the way to their quarters only to grab food. As they got to their quarters they noticed the nameplate on the next suite over. Hidden Sand. It was going to be a long 4 days trapped with those loonies from Suna. XXXXXXXXXX. Arrow thought about going to sleep after he felt his team reach safety in the tower. But he couldn't get his brain to shut down. Operating a variety of puppets like Naruto did kept his mind continually occupied. And it was circling around Orochimaru and the oddities with Suna. Sleep sometimes came and it sometimes stayed away like an upset pouting child. Arrow got up and began wandering the village. He hadn't had a chance to do that in the light of day, not with his trio to keep on the straight and narrow. He walked down streets and remembered what they'd smelled like in the daylight, with people moving on them and sun beating down. He meandered near to where his apartment building had stood. The fire had started. It evidently destroyed a portion of the building. It had been razed, but nothing else yet stood in its place. He walked over to that ramen stand had loved. It was closed now, but the scent of flavored broth hung tauntingly in the air. There was that playground that was usually deserted in the evenings. He had first used a swing set there. He decided, what the hell. For 20 minutes he pretended to be a kid rather than a teenager trapped inside a puppet. He swung and he laughed, and he tried to think good thoughts about the place had come back to. There weren't a lot of good memories, mostly of the old man in his office or in that ramen stand talking, listening to Naruto. That was before his cold bureaucratic period, of course. Eventually he left the park. He was close now, close to a place he didn't want to visit. He hesitated to walk down a certain street, but eventually his feet took him to where his heart didn't want to go. This was where had been crushed between two carts. This was the alley had been chased down. This was the store where had tried to buy 2 plums. The sleepless Naruto wondered what had ever happened to the man. Was he the Kurosawa of Kurosawa grocers? Did he live upstairs in the apartment above the store? Was his light on up there now? Arrow jumped up and took a peek inside. He saw that hateful man, much aged, passed out in a chair. The wasteful lights were on inside the apartment. Naruto could see everything so clearly. The cause of so much pain had both his legs, had his health, was free to come and go and do as he pleased. He hadn't been forced to become an exile. He hadn't been forced to reverse engineer techniques in order to get training to be a ninja. He wasn't living the life of another, watching life on the outside pass him by. The old man was free, completely free. Something snapped inside of Naruto's mind. Anger, blinding red rage poured through him. He didn't know he had this kind of thing inside him. Was it the fox coming loose? Or was this from inside his own heart and mind? His arms ripped the window from the building. The Taro puppet was designed to be 10 times stronger than a human body. As the aged man woke from his sleep, he didn't realize the danger he was in. What? Why are you in my apartment, foreigner? Arrow said nothing. His arms began raining blow after blow down onto the man's body. Ligaments cracked and tore. Bones chipped, broke, and ground together. Muscles sustained intolerable amounts of damage. Within 30 seconds, the grocer who refused to sell Naruto plums who chased him away to meet 2 crushing carts in a busy street who never received punishment of any sort, he was dead. His body looked like a small calf's that had fallen into a pulverizing machine. Blood and meat and sinew dripped onto the carpet, spread everywhere. When he stopped breaking a dead man's bones and tissue, Taro surveyed the bloody mess. Naruto captured the true image of his rage and promptly vomited inside the confined space of Taro's hollow center. The stomach acids burned slightly on his mouth, face, chest, and hands. He roused himself from the red rage he couldn't stop seeing in front of him. He needed to get away. He needed to wash up. He needed to pray to Kami for forgiveness. He needed to check his seal to be sure that the fox wasn't loosening his bonds. Arrow leapt away from the damaged apartment, jumping from roof to roof until he reached a tranquil training ground. He cleaned himself in a stream running through the property. Naruto had to exit Taro and then submerge his Taro puppet in the water to get out all the vomit. But the running water did nothing to wash away Naruto's current self-loathing. He had finally given in to his impulse for wrath. And it was horrible. He climbed back inside of Taro and slept the night in the forest. Finally, he did fall asleep. Hard asleep. Slept better than he had in years. XXXXXXXXXX. The next day, a stunned and dismayed Hokage would visit the crime scene. He had never before in his tenure as Hokage visited a civilian crime scene, but he had kept the name Kurosawa in the back of his mind. He had expected something to eventually happen to the man, but he hadn't expected this. No, not at all. The piece of the man's cracked skull had been flung to the ceiling. It hung there still, held in place by drying gore. This was the work of a Naruto he didn't know. Or, the Hokage reminded himself, the work of someone who knew of Naruto or acted on his command. It might not be Naruto's hand that did this, just his voice ordering it. The style was all wrong, for one thing. Naruto's puppetry was elegant and hard to detect. The Hokage had fallen victim to the same trick twice, a feat few could claim to have gotten past the god of shinobi. This attack was more like a mauling. The ex-ninja didn't have an unbroken bone larger than a few centimeters. What had happened to Naruto in the last 6 years? The Hokage had recognized that the boy was angry. Was this brutality a result of his tenant? He hadn't felt demonic chakra last night. Why was Naruto back after his self-imposed exile? To do more of this? To kill more Leaf civilians or ninja? That he snuck in with all the foreign ninja in town for the tournament? The Hokage felt old, bone-weary old. It was most disturbing. The Hokage prayed that Naruto had not done this thing, but he could do nothing but believe that the small blonde boy was involved. Taro regarded the preliminary eliminations with a bored expression. He didn't have a clue why there was a prelim round. Only 5 of 22 teams finished the Forest of Death exam. Surely the rich civilians, lords, and ninjas could stand to watch 15 competitors demonstrate their skills. Taro looked over the genin standing below him. The grass team, the sand team, an odd bunch from Sound, and 2 teams from Konoha. By the way the Hidden Leaf members looked, they were surprised so few Leaf teams finished. Apparently 3 rookie teams had been entered and none of them acquired both scrolls. Indeed, one of the teams had suffered a fatality, an Akamichi. The speeches and posturing ended. Taro was only interested a single time in the proceedings. The Konoha genin, silver-haired and in glasses, a geek of the highest order, excused himself from the prelims. As he walked out of the venue, Taro's eyes followed him and assessed his physical condition. There was nothing wrong with him, nothing at all. Interesting. A few dozen spy-capacity micro-puppets flew from a storage compartment and made their new home in the genin's hair and clothing. This person merited more observation. Someone with the stones to lie to the Hokage about his physical condition was either crazy or up to something. The matches began. Taro watched to see what the current standard of genin was. There were some interesting developments, but most of it was fairly low level. The best match was a rather flashy battle between a Lied Leaf genin and that red-headed monster from Sand. Naruto felt a chakra signature surge momentarily. It was one he didn't like. It was suppressed quickly, but Taro was designed to detect things like that. Orochimaru was in the room. The present battle had excited or enraged him. Taro swept his eyes across the room. He felt it again when the red-headed freak almost crushed the Leaf genin. There, he was the Sound's team sensei. Or at least hiding out in his form. Bad, very bad news. Taro's eyes remained fixed on the battles, but Naruto inside him was keeping an eye on the Sound jounin. Then something came down the chakra strings attached to the silver-haired genin. Kabuto was also speaking with Orochimaru. All of Naruto's attention went into listening in via his spying micro-puppets. "You dropped out again, Kabuto?" the Sannin asked. The smile on his face looked cruel. "I need to remain unsuspected for some while yet. Then I can reveal more of who I really am." "Fine. Please work with our allies to set everything into motion. I expect our allies to have plenty of legitimate reasons to be in and out of the Leaf. My observations," Kabuto said, "are that our ace in the hole will perform as expected. I followed him around before the tournament started. The Leaf will be in for a treat. I will let you on your way, then. One final thing. See what you can learn about the jounin from Grass. He has a rather large interfering nose. He might need to learn a lesson. Information, first, though." "Yes, my lord." The pair parted and Naruto lost himself in thought. He followed Kabuto on his viewing screen, but the genin went nowhere else of interest. The collaborator, Kabuto, had information that Naruto wanted for himself. The genin didn't know it yet, but his life was forfeit. Taro paid half a mind to the rest of the exhibition, but he couldn't keep Orochimaru out of his thoughts. The hints were there. But Taro did not know the when and where, the fine details. He really needed a better source of information on the man. Taro stood impassive until the prelims were over and the final round draws were done. He collected his 3 genin, all successful in passing into the finals. It was expected. Taro said. "We will be leaving the village now. We're not training in such a place as this for the next month." Relief washed over their faces. None of them had ever been in such a dangerous place as this village before. Orochimaru struck twice, that red-headed kid was a menace. It was tough being on guard all the time. In the preparations for leaving, none of his genin noticed Taro's creation of a half-dozen shadow clones, which promptly hinged into other forms. They had a task to complete. As Taro took his students for a last dinner before departing Konoha for a month, the shadow clones approached to where the genin Kabuto was speaking in hushed, rushed tones. The spy micro-puppets captured everything said and now it was time to capture Kabuto himself. Naruto needed to know what this interesting person knew. The shadow clones formed up thick chakra strings. 2 of them coordinated their strike. Kabuto walked away from his meeting and turned down a darkened street when he felt foreign chakra enter his body. Within a second, he lost all control of his muscles and began to fall. Just as quickly he felt something holding him up. It was the shadow clones doing it, of course. One of the 2 shadow clones wielding chakra strings had penetrated Kabuto's spinal cord with chakra and temporarily disrupted the transmission of nerve information at the C5 vertebra. When the technique was released, Kabuto's spinal cord would be undamaged so long as Naruto wished that to happen. The other clone quickly deployed chakra strings to Kabuto's hands, legs, and major joints to keep him from slumping over like a worthless drunk. The other shadow clones hung back in case anything unexpected happened. Kabuto walked to a darkened training ground. The first test of the puppet master technique was a success. In theory, it should work every time but it was always in practice that things went wrong. One of the shadow clones rifled through Kabuto's belongings and found a blank scroll. The clone traced out a complex sealing array and then placed Kabuto's forehead to the scroll. An application of chakra later and Kabuto was gone, leaving only the scroll. All the shadow clones save for the one clutching the scroll dismissed themselves. That clone walked slowly toward the village gate. He waited outside the village for nearly an hour before Taro plucked the rather valuable scroll from the shadow clone. That clone then returned inside the village and began its primary duty. Espionage. As Naruto thought about the storage scroll in his hand, he wondered just how things had gotten that bad, that wrong in his former home. Spies walking everywhere, S-rank ninja popping in and out. Taro needed a better handle on the place and what the Snake Sannin was planning. He needed accurate information. Too bad this Genin Kabuto lay in the way. It would be most unpleasant for him if he chose to be difficult. XXXXXXXXXX. Number 4, do you want your sculptures back? Number 3 asked. Hold on to them until the end of this tournament. Better you have something in reserve. They had traveled through the night and only begun talking once they hit the grass country border. Are we taking missions while we're back in grass? Number 1 asked. Pharaoh shook his head. No. You are on training leave for the next month. I am going to help each of you to create at least one new original technique plus I am going to ensure that you have the techniques and information necessary to handle your opponents. We have a Hyuga, a Jinchuriki, and some type of bizarre medical experiment attaching sound-making machines to a human body. It's rather distasteful. Naruto spent the rest of the run back to the village, explaining what he knew of the Byakugan, what he knew of the Bijuu and those humans unfortunate enough to imprison them, and his hypotheses about Orochimaru and the Hidden Sound Village. His students were less than impressed and were openly debating whether they should return to Konoha at all. Number 3 was visibly upset at having to fight a Jinchuriki. Stop it. Number 3 already has the beginning of a technique to deal with Gaara. We'll need to get your steam even hotter. What will that do, number 4? We will increase the pressure exerted by your air affinity to increase the temperature of your steam. If we get it right, your superheated steam will be able to penetrate even sand armor, I'd expect. The redhead's ultimate defense is not perfect. The genin were not convinced. Taro led his students to his apartment and offered them tea. Let me explain. Every technique, no matter how imposing, has flaws. So long as a ninja is aware of the flaws, he or she can adapt or compensate for them. But this Jinchuriki has no other techniques we've seen other than his sand. His body is thin and weak, he does not exercise. I doubt he even has a taijutsu style. That's relied upon a single style of ninja art which we will be picking apart and destroying theoretically during our training period and then for real in 1 month. Number 3 looked a little less pale, but he wasn't fully convinced. Fine, perhaps I can use a steam attack against him. But how do I use it while protecting myself from his sand? Taro nodded. It was an excellent question. You have realized a weakness of your steam. It's powerful offensively, but offers little defensive protection. Sometimes it is necessary to pair techniques together in order to minimize weaknesses. Can you think of something that would stop sand? Number 1 nodded. A water technique of some sort. Something that would soak the sand. Number 2 nodded. Or wind. Something that flings back whatever sand approaches you. Okay, I get it. This isn't a death sentence, number 3 said. No. Number 3 will win his battle if I have anything to do with it. You will be ready, I promise. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto gave his genin the morning off to recuperate from their vicious training cycles of the previous day. Had worked up a bit of technique using his wind affinity to mimic Gaara's sand-wielding ability. From what Had heard of Orochimaru and Kabuto's conversation, Gaara was involved in all of this. He wanted his students prepared to deal with him. Had blasted number 3 with it for hours and forced numbers 1 and 2 to take an hour each. Had helped number 2 with a vicious new technique, vicious and non-lethal. She had Hyuga Niji to deal with and Taro didn't especially want her to kill him. Almost everything in number 2's quiver was lethal and messy. Number 1 had to go against that medical experiment from sound. He was working on a jinjutsu that inflicted pain proportional to whatever the ensnared thought they were inflicting. They were all becoming excited about their upcoming matches, even number 3. Their change in attitude, almost as much as the beating they'd received in training yesterday, earned them a day off. There was also the fact that Naruto was excited to finally sit down to talk to Kabuto. He made the journey to the largest of his bolt holes in grass country. Had long since turned it into his laboratory. He had a room for distilling poisons. He had a room for copies of the jutsu scrolls Had collected and stolen. 2 rooms held various experiments with different micro-puppets and his stick of tools and supplies to create them. He now needed to make a new room for his newest acquisition. It only took an hour to carve it with a rather useful earth technique. He fashioned a rather substantial door and hung it. Naruto, still inside his Taro puppet, walked inside. He pulled out a special storage scroll and set it on the floor. He unraveled 100 chakra strings and made ready to unseal the scroll's contents. He pumped chakra into the sealed scroll. A confused, immobilized genin appeared on the stone floor. Tero's chakra strings pressed up against Kabuto's spinal cord again, keeping him immobile. Tero had spent a few hours preparing a restraining device he wanted to test out on this genin. Kabuto finally roused from his enforced stupor. "Where am I?" "Somewhere very safe," Tero said. "You'll be my guest now, genin of Konoha, or are you infiltrator from Sound?" Kabuto's face tensed. "How are you doing this? Keeping me frozen? I'm not about to start giving away my secrets, am I? I would like to talk about Orochimaru and his plans for the chunin selection exam. I'm not telling you anything," Kabuto spat. "You will, little genin, you will if you ever expect to eat. I would rather die." Tero smiled. "Let me fit you up with your restraints." Tero pulled out long strips of something. They didn't look like paper or cloth. They had extensive and tiny seals all over their surface. He affixed one strip to Kabuto's neck where it promptly dissolved into the man's neck, leaving only the seals partially visible. Tero stripped the rest of Kabuto's clothing and wound the strange strips all over his torso, his arms, and his legs. Only after the last strip was applied to Kabuto's body did Tero apply chakra to the seals now permanently tattooed on his body. Tero stepped back and threw a lightweight sheet over the naked genin's body. Then he withdrew the chakra strings, keeping Kabuto paralyzed. Kabuto started to move and then he leapt at Tero. Tero smacked him across the small room. When Kabuto hit the solid stone, he flopped over and stopped moving. "Let me be clear. You will never mold chakra again, so long as you fight me. You will never mold chakra again if you ever lie to me. With a thought these seals can activate. You have 500 exploding seals etched inside your body now, Kabuto." The horror-stricken Kabuto raised his head up from the floor. "How could you do that? How was it possible?" "A lot of hard work. Now, you will tell me what you know of Orochimaru's plans. Be fast about it and I will find you some lunch." Kabuto didn't like his chances. He had turned on Sasori when Orochimaru offered a better deal. Now this unknown quantity was offering a terrible deal, but it was better than being utterly destroyed. The threatened 500 exploding seals would do more damage to his body than his self-regenerative abilities would heal. "I have worked with him for a few years, but I've only ever met with him a handful of times." "No. Let's start with what you know of his attack on Konoha." Kabuto's head dipped toward the stone floor. "I only know enough to complete my role. I was to ensure that Uchiha Sasuke made it out of the forest alive even if he failed to make it into the finals. I was to layer a genjutsu over the audience at the finals once that Gaara kid begins his fight." Naruto felt sicker and sicker the more he heard of this plot. Kabuto gave over a lot of information, but he didn't seem to possess the full plan. This would all be very problematic. Naruto needed to finish his puppet clone technique. He needed it in his repertoire if things went as badly as he feared. XXXXXXXXXX. As Tero returned with his students a day before the finals, everyone was in good spirits. They had plans and backup plans and had been working on improvisation skills. Tero expected some terrible things to happen in the next day or two. He hadn't passed on his knowledge of the exact details of what was supposed to happen, but he had done everything to prepare them to survive. Trial by fire for everyone involved. The four showed up the morning of the finals. Tero led them through final stretching and sparred with all three of them at the same time. The first two matches went as expected. The medical experiment had but one technique. Number 1 trapped the kid in a genjutsu within seconds. The boy proceeded to attack and attack. His mind was so overwhelmed with redirected pain that the genin's nose began to bleed and he eventually fell over onto the ground, convulsing. Every genin needed to be able to dispel a genjutsu. It was a basic requirement for field operations. The feared Hyuga had a wider range of attacks, but he was a short-distance fighter only. Number 2 preferred medium and long-range attacks. She took a bloody 10 minutes to demolish the pride of the Hyuga. He put up a good fight, but he was completely outclassed. The third match, the Jinchuriki vs number 3, began as expected. The weak redhead deployed his sand and didn't even move around the field of combat. Number 3 used a high-level water technique to soak a good portion of the sand. Then he went to stage 2. An A, bordering on S-rank technique for superheating and focusing a beam of steam. His use of the technique pierced right through Gaara's remaining sand and his sand armor. It created a hole straight through Gaara's shoulder which began to weep, then gush blood. The red-headed genin lost it then. And all hell broke loose in the arena. The bad thing which was going to happen had just started. The many fires inside Hidden Leaf began almost simultaneously. 15 clan compounds, 24 apartment buildings, commercial buildings, everything was fair game. It was a great diversionary tactic performed by 24 infiltrators from Suna. The command and control of the ninja force would break down people, would be trying to put out fires while the major strikes occurred. The more ninja prevented from repelling the major Suna and Odo, the more devastating their entry would be. Odo's trapping experts began their work rigging up the Hokage Tower and the Ninja Academy building. Lord Orochimaru would detonate these buildings once his conquest of Hidden Leaf was complete. While the infiltrators and trappers were inside causing chaos, the heavy hitters from both villages were outside the village walls, trying to bring them down. Some of Orochimaru's snake summons were queued up to crash through another section of the wall. It was amazing that the Anbu hadn't even detected these massive forces queuing up outside the village. Orochimaru's personal guards jumped through the city. They had been performing a final search for Kabuto in the interim. The spy appeared to have fled already. Lord Orochimaru would be most put out. Once they made it to the arena, Orochimaru had already captured the Hokage and begun his act of vengeance. The Sound Four molded a massive shield and then performed the jutsu a second time to protect themselves from the Hokage who was trapped inside their bubble. The arrogance of this village, Orochimaru hissed to his opponent on top of the arena to invite your enemies, to bare your throat to them and not even to carry a knife to the battle. Where are your Anbu, sensei? Why was this village so easy to destroy this day? Are you truly ready to die? Because I am most eager to kill you. The Hokage and Orochimaru were trading blows back and forth in hand-to-hand combat. Orochimaru wanted to utterly rattle the Hokage before he pulled out his final devastating technique, the impure resurrection of the Hokage's predecessors in office. It had been a gamble attacking today. The disappearance of Kabuto had almost caused Orochimaru to call of this attack, but when the Anbu and chunin patrols went as normal and the village wasn't on a higher security status, he guessed Kabuto hadn't defected to the Hokage's side. He would have to find and punish his infiltrator. Many things necessary for this attack hadn't been done. Kabuto would pay. His medical expertise was valuable, but Orochimaru could not stand a traitor. He was the only one of those permitted in the Hidden Sound. Orochimaru batted away one of his sensei's rather pedestrian techniques. He wished that Sarutobi would haul out his major techniques. He wouldn't want to win against a frail old man. The Hokage summoned the boss of the apes. He needed to use every tool in his arsenal. But he no longer had the chakra capacity to battle for hours against his student. He knew what the surefire way to end Orochimaru's life was, but he didn't know if he could give himself to the Shinigami for all time the way that Namikaze Minato had. It was a horrendous fate for one such as he. To never see his deceased family, his one dead son, his mentors, all of his precious people. Are you ready for a good fight, Enma? He would try to for an unexpected hit. Something that wasn't as devastating as the summoning of the Shinigami. As you wish, old friend, the Ape King said. The Hokage remained nimble, and his attacks with a bow would have been devastating to anyone not one of his students. They had spent too many years training against him to be surprised by Sarutobi's style. The Snake Sannin continued to taunt and rant, but the Hokage didn't listen to it. He was in this fight to preserve his village. He had lived a long time, but he didn't want to go out when his village was in peril. Not if he could fix his gravest mistake, not if he could somewhat repair his failure allowing Orochimaru to escape when his treacheries were discovered. You've never recognized your own faults, student of mine. If you could not have this village, then you wish to destroy it. Orochimaru laughed. You are a narrow-minded fool, protector of the weak, savior of stranded kittens everywhere. This village is as foolish as it is weak. I am only performing a service, a cleansing wash to get rid of all this rot. The Hokage was not winning, rather, he was slowly losing. The Hokage steeled himself to using the Shinigami summoning technique. It would cost him everything, but he knew he would take his greatest mistake with him. The village deserved this much from him. Orochimaru began the complex process of powering up his impure resurrection technique. He was ready for a bloody fight with powerful servant puppets at his disposal. The Hokage worried that he did not recognize this technique. If it had been developed by his student, it was likely to be powerful and disturbing. He gripped his special staff and prepared to face whatever might come. Then the Hokage disappeared. There was no one more surprised than the Hokage. He had a fraction of a second to recognize that he was trapped in some sort of sealing technique. Enma in his bow form fell to the ground and dispelled. Orochimaru stood, dismayed. His hands were frozen in the final hand seals for his impure resurrection. Where had that old bastard gone? How had he escaped from inside this shield? It was designed to kill anyone or anything that touched it. No. No. Where did he go? Who fucked up? He turned round and round glaring at his bodyguards. Then he saw Jirobo fall over dead, then Kidomaru. The shields began to waver then. Then Taiya collapsed. The shields collapsed. Orochimaru had no idea what was happening, he didn't even know it was possible to disrupt the shield. Orochimaru glared at the unfair world. Years of planning rendered useless. He didn't even know how. His mind began to grasp and prepare for the next phases of what he might do. Sarutobi had fled with his life, but Orochimaru could still destroy the village and kill its weaklings. He surveyed the roof and was preparing to jump off to cause more devastation when he felt 1,000 tiny pinpricks all over his body. He staggered at the sensation, then the flood of pain. It had been a very long time since he had felt anything like that, probably going back to his earliest experiments on himself to attain immortality. He reeled but did not fall down. His first thought was to flee, as self-preservation was a key trait of any powerful snake, but then his anger and his ego overrode instinct. He wanted to know who had ruined years of planning. So many things had gone wrong. His strongest potential vessel for his immortality technique, the Kagaya boy, had disappeared years ago. Kabuto had disappeared. Some jounin from grass had managed to drive him off with a technique he couldn't unravel. Now, this. Orochimaru wanted blood, he wanted guts and brains and bones ground down to meal. He wanted Sarutobi lying dead before him and Konoha little more than ashes blowing away in the wind. Using his best chakra sensing techniques, he tried to locate the source of what was happening and he found something. In great pain, he turned and saw a most unpleasant face. That ninja wad prevented him from taking the faces of some grass genin. The man who stripped Orochimaru's ability to mold chakra that ninja would die. You? How did you do this? That shield is the strongest technique of its kind. Tell me and I will give you a swift death. Pharaoh smiled. You are the worst sneaky ninja I've ever seen. I had a very good idea about what you might do today, but you had no idea about me. I wonder what that says about your intelligence gathering, Snake Sannin. Oh, someone revealed to me that you are also quite a thief. Pharaoh yanked his hand. Pain shot through Orochimaru's body as his sword, the grass cutter, stolen the grass country years earlier, ripped through bone, stomach lining, muscle, and skin on its way to Tero's hand. Pharaoh was glad head kept returning to probe Kabuto's loosened lips. The existence of this sword inside of Orochimaru's body made this one-time only attack possible. Anyone with skill in chakra strings could do this, but it took a devious ninja to think of the attack at all. It was very satisfying that Orochimaru's greatest close-range weapon was now turned against him. Orochimaru collapsed. How was that possible? His sword ripped from him, through him. Was this freak a magnetic field user, like that Kazukiya's old pal Sasori had been so enamored of? Orochimaru had seen this ninja twice and been slapped like a small child, robbed of chakra molding and now his sword. How? Why? Everything hurt so much. I suspect you are immune to any poison you'd use, Orochimaru, so that sword wound won't necessarily kill you. But I know you aren't immune to cancer. Those tiny impacts you felt a few moments ago were the seeds of 1,000 small cancers already racing through your body. I estimate you have 5 days before your body fails, your organs eaten away from the inside. From what I understand, you'll have to find a new host. The pale, bleeding Sannin woke from his misery when he realized that this ninja knew about his most secret researches. Someone had betrayed him. Kabuto Karen, someone very close. Orochimaru pushed himself up from his crumpled position on the arena roof. He began making hand signs, but again realized he cold mauled chakra. The hole in his torso had apparently torn the chakra network in this body to shreds. I've heard all about your body swapping technique, the grass jounin said. Good luck getting away. Your guard seemed to be indisposed. That hateful stare from the grass ninja burned itself into Orochimaru's mind. It was a face he would never forget. He would have his revenge. If it took 100 years, he would have this man's life. Orochimaru would still be young, agile, and beautiful, while the ninja before him was old and infirm. If it took that long, Orochimaru would find the old, weak, infirm man and end his life slowly, painfully. The pooling blood reached into Orochimaru's field of vision, he didn't know why he was still alive. This grass ninja could have incinerated him by now, instead of staring. The Sannin felt a hand grasp him, interrupting his dark musings. He looked up and saw it was Seiken. My lord, I couldn't move until now. Away. Get us away, Orochimaru rasped out. This would have been an excellent time to have Kabuto around. If he wasn't a traitor. The guard and his lord shined away. Pharaoh smiled. Anyone who threatened his team deserved to die. Taro could have done worse to the snake Sannin, but he relished the idea of tearing that creature apart slowly, piece by piece. He felt an irrational amount of hatred toward the pale ninja, a hatred he would allow himself to quench. Pharaoh walked to the edge of the arena and observed the field of battle below him. The useless Anbu watching Orochimaru's attempted assassination scattered when the Hokage disappeared, gone to locate him or help out repelling the invasion. Pharaoh bent down and picked up an oddly inscribed stone and slipped it into his pocket. The Hokage had never left the dome, of course, just been sealed away into an unconventional storage vessel. A chakra string was perfectly able to pass through that impenetrable shield. Arrogant ninja. Orochimaru knew of Sasori's art and still disregarded its power. The stone felt heavy in Taro's pocket. It had been obvious to any watchers that the Hokage was using all his effort, all his will and that he was losing. Orochimaru had just been playing with him. Taro needed to keep the old man safe for a while longer. He wanted a word with him. But that wouldn't happen if the rest of this disaster didn't end soon. Taro looked into the distance and saw that the Suna and Odo ninja were still fighting. Their leader was driven from the field but they'd lose their lives in a pointless failed battle. Taro had thought long and hard in the last month about what he'd do when Konoha found itself in dire straits. Could he separate out the old man of his memory from the colder Hokage? Could he save the place the old man loved? He could just as easily let the whole place burn. Their arrogance had allowed this attack to occur. Did he really wish to be a savior of some sort? He stopped thinking and acted. He could second-guess himself later. He concentrated and formed two thick chakra cables. The individual strings stretched out and latched onto half-burned boards or fallen stones all through the field of battle. The process of inscribing seals was slower than he wanted. Using 12 individual chakra strings on each nascent heartstone took 30 seconds to get his mass puppet clone technique ready. Naruto intended to name this particular usage of his puppet clone's technique something else. The flowing red death. Nearly as fast as the Yondaime Hokage's flying thunder god technique and far more devastating. This was a technique that could destroy armies in seconds, end wars instantly, destroy and level villages. He wished he didn't have to reveal his greatest technique to save this miserable place. Seconds later, Naruto revealed how one ninja could destroy an entire army from a safe distance. His left pinky finger twitched a few millimeters. In front of every ninja Taro could see or otherwise detect a puppet clone erupted, forming up around its heartstone. Each puppet slashed with fire, wind or lightning once or twice, and then each of them disappeared. None of the newly dead even had a chance to blink. The mass slaughter of 200 enemy ninja took less than a quarter second from activation to the clone's dissipation. A few observers would only be able to report seeing a massive sea of red, the color of each puppet's hair, body, and clothing, a signature element of the flowing red death, meant to confuse and disorient anyone who might witness the technique. After that, they reported dead bodies as far as the eye could see. No ninja could defend against an attack so unexpected, so rapid, and so devastating. No one targeted did survive. In the coming days many would try to explain the attack and how it worked, no one would succeed at that, either. Arrow jumped down from the arena roof with the Hokage safely sealed away inside his pocket. He needed to find where his students had gotten to and to see if anyone had dealt with that insane red head from hidden sand. Orochimaru was gravely wounded, the main body of the invasion force was destroyed, but Taro suspected that the worst was still to come. Why did he let the Grass Council send him and his team to this kami-forsaken place in the first place? A small awed crowd watched as that horrible demonic sand beast took swipe after swipe against massive summons. A wolf larger than the Ninja Academy, a dragon longer than the eastern village wall, a rhinoceros with a horn jabbing in and out of the swirling sand of the raccoon-like abomination. It was a terrifying sort of theater, held in the forest outside the village walls. No one in the crowd had seen anything like it. The guardian animals looked like summons, but they didn't act like them. Indeed, none of the higher-level ninja knew who held contracts like these. They circled and enclosed and delayed the inevitable. Except that every time the sand beast attacked one of the other animals, the wolf or the dragon or the rhino recovered from the wound and continued on their containment. They seemed to be waiting for something. Thankfully, none of the otherwise useless onlookers noticed Regrass Genin weary with chakra exhaustion in the woods nearby. They were vulnerable right now and didn't want any attention focused their way. They wouldn't be able to defend themselves against even a determined civilian assassin. It seemed like nothing would tip the balance. The three summons versus that sand monster. Then the scene changed. A real summon entered the battle with a tall old man, his shaggy white hair aloft in the wind, on top of his head. The wolf, dragon, and rhino regarded the massive toad for a moment before returning to their confinement of the sand beast. A small red-headed child on top of the sand beast yelled at the white-haired man. They feinted and parried their attacks. Then the redhead smiled a cruel smile and fell asleep. The sand beast increased in strength. It was a demon almost fully in possession of its ancient powers. Guerrilla the Toad Sage tried everything in his book of riddles. He used massive waves of oil-fueled fire. He tried sinking the sand beast in a massive chakra-driven swamp. Nothing worked. The sand whipped around faster and faster, stronger each passing second. Guerrilla spoke in hushed tones to convince Gamabunta to leap directly at the sand beast, to destroy the Jinchuriki, to end the demon's physical manifestation. It was a suicide move. Gamabunta would likely survive with only wounds. He could dissipate back to his own realm at will, even wounded heads survive and get patched up. But Jiraiya would have to arrange a perfect strike at the sand kid or else he would die. Gamabunta leapt into the air, but something happened to the target. The sleeping Redeed went flying through the air and collided into a tree. His eyes popped open. Once he was awake, the demonic sand monster was disrupted. Gamabunta fell through the air, passing through where the sand beast had been. He and his summoner landed in a thick grating pile of sand. The sand beast was no more. Someone or something had attacked the Suna kid. But who? Why? And why didn't Jiraiya think of doing something like that? Damn, he was getting slow in the head. Gamabunta began yelling at Jiraiya for being a stupid pervert with brain rot from all your whoring around. Those huge summons then vanished, too. Wolf, dragon, rhino. Gone. Jiraiya hadn't had the time to even think about what they were, but wow, damn. He need to question someone who'd seen the whole exchange. Several Suna shinobi went to either help or kill off the redhead, but Jiraiya saw another ninja intercept and restrain them. The tall, black-haired man knelt down and spoke to the Jinchuriki. The now fearful redhead nodded a few times and began crying. What in the hell could make a Jinchuriki cry, Jiraiya wondered. Less than a minute ago, he was trying to kill everything he set his eyes on. Who was this ninja who could say a few words and get that kind of reaction? Jiraiya needed to talk to this ninja. He jumped off Gamabunta, who was still yelling at Jiraiya, and rolled onto the ground, one of his more elegant moves. He ran toward the redhead and that other ninja. By the time he arrived, the redhead had been packed off by Suna ninja. The black-haired ninja stepped in front of Jiraiya, a mildly menacing gesture. The Toad Sage stopped as this ninja was his target. He could always catch up with the redhead later. He'd almost certainly be heading to Hidden Sand. Jiraiya could slap on some new seals and keep that blasted tanuki under control. You? Who are you? Jiraiya bellowed. He was going for intimidation. I am the one who will repair that boy's poor seals, the ninja responded. I am a seal master, young ninja. I am the great Toad Sage. The roll of the eyes showed exactly what the grass ninja thought of the Toad Sage. Jiraiya, yes I know. I know much of your exploits, venerable ninja. Jiraiya frowned. Venerable was just a politer word for old. No old ninja could still bag a dozen different beauties, a weak no venerable ninja would have the stamina. And your name? I am called Taro of the River. It didn't mean anything to the Toad Sage. He needed more information. You fancy yourself some kind of seal master, then? Taro smiled. I do fairly well. Now, please excuse me. I have students to look after. Jiraiya held up his hand. Those grass ninja. You trained them? The look of pride erupted on Taro's face as he nodded. Those three are quite the powerhouse, Jiraiya said. They'd be brutal on the battlefield. I will pass along the compliment, Toad Sage. Taro then disappeared. Wait. Jiraiya still had questions. He had never heard of this Taro person before and Jiraiya made it a point to know every seal master he came across. After all, no ninja could cause havoc quite like a seal master. Sealing demons, releasing demons, engineering exploding tags large enough to demolish a 15-foot wall. All the exploits of sealing masters. Damn. Now I need to find Sarutobi-sensei and tell him what I've seen. The Toad Sage bounded away. Taro looked at where Jiraiya had just stood. He waited for Jiraiya to leave before searching for his students. Jiraiya. The Toad Sage. Naruto remembered the profile of the man locked among the old man's secret papers. He remembered the birth certificate for one Uzumaki Naruto, listing Jiraiya the Toad-san as godfather. More anger bubbled inside Naruto. He began to regret helping to save this miserable place, save it for irresponsible assholes like this Jiraiya. A plan formed in his mind. Then Taro took off, tracking back to the micro-puppets he had on his students. They weren't injured, but were too weak to fight or defend themselves. He needed to get them situated. XXXXXXXXXX. Guerrilla leapt all over the village, surveying the damage, helping where he could. His main priority right now was finding his sensei. Had helped disarm a variety of explosives from the Hokage Tower, but no Sarutobi. Had helped to stabilize the damaged walls of the hospital, but no Sarutobi. He tended to the wounds, helped put out fires, transported some of the prisoners of the invasion, no Sarutobi. The more he looked, the greater his fear. His sensei, the Hokage, was dead or captured. What would Konoha do without its leader? Could it rebuild? Could it survive? XXXXXXXXXX. Arrow took his students to an out-of-the-way training ground and threw up tents in the deep brush. He settled his students into bedrolls and made sure they drank water and took their ninja vitamin pills. They weren't dangerous like soldier pills, but they would help to repair the damage from mild to medium chakra exhaustion. I will be leaving some traps, but sleep with one eye open, as we like to say. I will return in a few hours to see how you are. If you are strong enough, we will return tonight or tomorrow. Did the statues work? Number 3 asked. Arrow smiled. You three saved Konoha and they'll never know. As you remember, a Jinchuriki holds the power of a demon. But that boy had been driven insane by his. In his rage he released it fully. How do you stop a Biju? Number 1 asked. I didn't need to, Taro said. I only had to stop the technique the little boy was using. Had gone to sleep and given the demon free rein. I used a simple technique called chakra strings to yank the boy off that sand creature and slam him into a tree. The crazed demon didn't even notice, he was too busy enjoying his freedom. Number 2 mumbled, half asleep. I am glad. Did you collect the statues you loaned us? Arrow shook his head. No, they are designed to be used a single time. After the demon's fury broke, the 3 creatures released the chakra you gave them and dissolved into sawdust. Number 1 had to chuckle. You are paranoid about your techniques, aren't you, Number 4? All good ninjas should be. I would not have such things used against me. But that he jumped from the tent and took off for the caverns beneath the Hokage monument. He wanted a quiet place for a conversation. When he released the seal storing the Hokage inside a chunk of broken masonry, the old man looked pale and determined. "Where is Orochimaru?" the Hokage shouted. He was shaking and looking around in confusion. "I saved your life, and you wonder where your worthless student is. I drove him off." Taro pulled a blade from the sheath on his back. "After reclaiming this blade, the grass cutter, for my country." The anger in the Hokage's eyes dimmed. "Thank you, then, for that service. How did my village fare? In a few minutes you can see for yourself. But, I will say that I am displeased with what you did with the warning I gave you." Orochimaru entered the forest of death and wounded countless students, including the near-fatal sealing of Uchiha Sasuke. "I understand one of the Akamichi of the Hidden Leaf died. Then he pops up sitting next to you in the arena at the finals. You are too old to remain Hokage. I should kill you for your insolence, young ninja. As you have just saved my life, I will tell you this is not your concern." Taro nodded and made to leave the cavern. One measure of success of a leader is always having a successor groomed and prepared to take over without interruption. "Had I not saved you, who would have picked up the pieces?" An angry, sad Hokage blinked at the odd advice. "Again, this is not your concern. I cannot discuss village secrets with one such as you." "You are correct, of course, old man. I made the Hidden Leaf not my concern many years ago." Taro vanished before the Hokage could ascertain what the grass jounin meant. Then the answer came to him. "Naruto. He always called me old man. Perhaps he is becoming as strong as he claimed he would." The Hokage could not lift himself from the floor for a few minutes as tears streamed down his face. When the Hokage left the cavern to search for Naruto, the reality of the devastation in Hidden Leaf assaulted him. The dead, the wounded, the families burned out of their homes. Ninjas angry and ready for vengeance, needing a firm hand to restrain them now until a plan was ready. Then, Jiraiya insisted the Hokage visit the hospital before doing anything else. Being 70 with a severe case of chakra exhaustion was not a pleasant thing. As he was sent into an enforced sleep, the Hokage wondered if he should send an emissary to this Taro from grass country. A ninja had saved the Hokage's life. Naruto might be angry, but he still cared for the village. A bittersweet realization. XXXXXXXXXX. The grass team left in the pre-dawn hours the next day. Numbers 1, 2, and 3 were feeling much better. "I have not discussed it with the grass council obviously," Taro said, "but all three of you qualify as chunin in my book." "Thank you, number 4, number 1 said. The group then fell silent as they began their journey. By sundown they'd be in grass country. They were moving at a far slower pace than usual, given the events of the previous day. As with the last time he left Hidden Leaf, Taro left behind a few shadow clones. They had a task to perform. A few hours later, when Kunoichi and civilian women began attending the baths, the shadow clones discovered their target, Jiraiya, peeping. A few chakra strings interrupted the nerve signals from his brain. A quick storage scroll later and Jiraiya was a captive. Predictability in a ninja was a dangerous thing, as Jiraiya might someday finally learn. All but one of the shadow clones dispelled. The remaining one hinged into an injured man's face and clothing. It walked slowly, painfully, to the village gates. Mixed in among all the devastation, no one noticed how Jiraiya the Toad Sage left the Hidden Leaf village. Into every victory, tendrils of defeat must creep. Naruto and his team did not make it back to grass without a nasty surprise. A massive dark cloaked ninja erupted from the underbrush when the team was within 10 kilometers of the grass country border. "I would speak with Taro of the river, please." The voice was gravelly and inhuman. A chill went up Naruto's spine as he rested within the body of his puppet Taro. He recognized this hulking beast. The useful traitor Kabuto had described him exactly this way. This was a battle puppet of Akasuna no Sasori, the revered insane puppet master from Hidden Sand. The man was at least 20 years older than Naruto and had been trained by other puppeteers. It was terrifying looking at this other puppet, looking and wondering what Sasori saw when he looked at Taro. Would this master of the puppet technique recognize another puppeteer in Taro and Naruto? This was the worst possible person to meet up with on a day like this with tired chunin to be. "My name is Taro," Naruto's puppet intoned in a perfectly human voice. The revolting puppet in front of them gave Taro a careful scrutiny. "You are smaller than I expected. From the wild reports I've received, I figured you for at least 15 feet tall. Is it true you eat a whole cow for breakfast in the morning?" "I did not ask for a reputation," Taro said. His students watched and prepared. They did not know that Sasori was stronger even than Orochimaru on a good day. "Anyone who can gut my old tricky friend Orochimaru is worthy of a reputation, Taro of the river. I wonder what would happen if you and I were to fight, eh?" Taro drew the grass cutter off his back. With his other hand, he prepared 100 of his puppet clones in case of dire straits. Naruto didn't want to reveal that he was a puppeteer in front of this S-rank monster. In truth, he wasn't even sure his self-designed puppet techniques would be able to cause any damage to another puppet master. Sasori wore a hardened shell so Taro's micro-puppets and chakra poisons were useless. A master puppeteer could just as easily overpower Naruto's chakra strings attached to a puppet army as fall victim to it. If a fight broke out, he would have to go nuclear quickly. Naruto had devastating techniques, but had never fought against a skilled puppeteer before. Naruto remembered a profile head read of the Uchiha among the Hokage's papers. Their arrogance is astounding as they teach their children, only an Uchiha can kill an Uchiha. Naruto was fairly terrified that the real truth was that only a puppeteer could kill another puppeteer. Today was not the day he wanted to test that hypothesis. After all, he knew from close calls in the past that experience could beat out superior techniques any day of the week. Upon seeing Taro draw the grass cutter, Sasori did not attack. He chuckled. Excellent. Excellent work, Taro. I see that my spies were not wrong. You have taken that sword from Orochimaru. Sasori's puppet gave some more gravelly chuckles. For the pleasure you've given me this day, you may pass. But you interest me, so I'm sure I'll be seeing you again. The large Hulk quickly took off in the direction of Wind Country. Taro and his students did not move until Sasori was no longer visible. Was that? Number 2 began to ask. They say his parents named him the Scorpion of the Bloody Sands at birth, Taro explained. Has only gotten worse since then. Taro's students nodded. They had studied the bingo books. We'll be running the rest of the way. Keep your senses keen. Presume that we're walking into traps and ambushes. We will not stop, if possible, until we're in the central office. Taro didn't wait for an answer, he began to run. Who knows what some crafty bugger like Sasori could do given enough time. He allowed a narrow stream of questions to populate his mind. How had Sasori heard about the battle yesterday already? Spies, but who? How had Sasori known Taro's route? Taro hadn't taken a straight line path. He cut through certain segments of the forest, he used roads that were little better than cart trails. Had Sasori's spies marked Taro in some way for tracking purposes? This wasn't a coincidence. Damn. Naruto needed more experience before he wanted to have a target painted on his back. XXXXXXXXXX. 3 days had passed since Taro had met Sasori on the road. Had been stuck in meetings, debriefings, and every other kind of administrivia. He had not had a chance to return to his laboratory since returning. Naruto wanted out of Taro. He hadn't crawled out since vomiting on himself after his loss of control with the old storekeeper. He only entered or exited his puppet when he was in a safe place. Finally, Naruto couldn't stand it any longer. He put in for a 2-day leave to recuperate from his experiences. Once they realized that battling Orochimaru wasn't an abstract thing or a great story, but something Taro had actually done and likely something Taro needed to heal or recuperate from, the other Jounin looked sheepish and granted him the time off. He made it quickly to his laboratory complex. While he ran, he thought up more questions he had for Kabuto. He needed a more thorough interrogation on Kabuto's work with Sasori. Orochimaru angered Naruto, but Sasori scared him. He needed to figure out why. A ninja had to be in control of his emotions. Plus, Naruto had hated to feel fear. Kabuto should also have some progress on a few new targeted poisons. A puppeteer cold dressed on his laurels, after all. He knew more of the wider world now, he knew better the kinds of things he needed in his arsenal. One new poison was supposed to be a protection against the Hyuga or the Uchiha, people with special eye-based techniques. They wouldn't be able to use their eyes if they'd been dosed with an ocular nerve poison, right? It was a fairly extreme measure, but Naruto had heard some horrifying things about Uchiha Itachi. Seeing the Hyuga in person had also reminded Naruto to be more wary of them. After all, the Byakugan could likely detect chakra strings if the wielder knew what he or she was looking for. Taro passed through the final door protecting his lab. Naruto piled out of his damned puppet. He had been so busy during his training month that he hadn't left then. That was stupid. He had allowed himself to be preoccupied, to not take care of himself. He needed a shower. And some food that he didn't have to eat from the tube that came down Taro's mouth and throat. He had gotten tired of eating things that had already been chewed by his puppet's jaws first. The warm water felt great. He was too old to ride around in a puppet like that. It had been fun at the age of 8. Now that he was nearing 15, it was less fun. Taro's identity was almost at the end of its usefulness anyway. Sasori and Orochimaru were both interested in Taro. It was time for Taro to disappear. How? Perhaps Naruto would take over the life of an Iowa peasant farmer or a tea-drying warehouse manager. It was good he'd made other identities so long ago. All the better to slip away. But, what would he tell his students? The 3 of them were probably the only people Naruto had ever formed an emotional connection to, leaving aside the old man. He didn't know what he wanted to do. The answer would come in time. Taro walked down the hallway to where that worm Kabuto was stored. One needed to be wary even around someone who could no longer mold chakra. Tell me if the progress you've made is worth enough to keep me feeding you. It was a familiar ritual to Kabuto. He was little more than a laboratory rat now. He had thought long and hard about swallowing one or another of the various poisons available to him or attempting to use them on his captor. He didn't have the right plan. He didn't know what the seals inscribed inside body would really do to him. He knew the threatened consequences but it wasn't proof positive. The serum you requested is finished. It should work, but I don't have anyone to test it on. Unlike your former master, Kabuto, I do not test horrible poisons on innocents. I have a suitable test subject in mind. Pharaoh accepted the poison and tucked it away safely. I have need of your memory again, Kabuto. We're going to talk about your former spy master, Sasori. Tell me how he met you. I've told you this before. You're going to tell me again, little ninja without chakra. I have information about the Sasori from other sources than you. I wish to know whether you're lying to me. Convince me, Kabuto. The silver-haired prisoner sighed and began. XXXXXXXXXX. After listening to Kabuto for 6 hours, Naruto felt like he needed another shower. Kabuto was too dangerous a person to allow to live, powerful, amoral and cruel, a mimic of great capacity, a spy able to infiltrate a village and remain for years. He locked Kabuto away. The ninja needed to be dealt with, but he was still useful for now. Naruto took a rather special storage scroll into another part of his laboratory, far away from Kabuto. He sealed himself inside a bare stone room. He formed up chakra strings, ready to immobilize Jiraiya once he reappeared. When Jiraiya awoke, he found he couldn't move and he was in a horrible stone cellar. There was a guy in the corner that grasped Jounin. What the hell? Where am I and why can't I move? I choose not to let you move, Toad Sage. In fact, you won't move again until we've had a satisfactory conversation. I will kick your ass very soon. Pharaoh nodded. Yes, in a straight fight you would likely win. But, know this, Jiraiya, I almost never fight fairly. Why be stupid and give up my advantages? How are you doing this? I've never heard of restraining seals that leave the head free but paralyze everything else. Pharaoh kept a blank expression. Misdirection was a prime tool of a good ninja. Jiraiya filtered everything through his knowledge of seals and flashy techniques. Would he be surprised if he discovered 2 thin strands of chakra kept him lying on the cold stone floor? Guerrilla, dead last of his academy class, member of the legendary 3, holder of the Toad contract, mentor to the 4th Hokage, and the only Leaf ninja to ever exceed your own accomplishments, and godfather to that same man's son. Here Jiraiya looked confused. Godfather and you don't even remember. Fitting, I suppose. I've read many of your confidential reports to the Hokage over the years, Jiraiya. I know you asked for and received updates on the boy. His name was Uzumaki Naruto, I believe. How? How did a grass Jounin steal my coded reports? The man didn't want to believe. Naruto wouldn't be parting with any secrets this early. He wouldn't relate how he'd stolen the Hokage's private correspondence years ago. I have better spies than you do. Jiraiya had no intention of giving anything away. Fine. Let me see what I can guess from what I know of you. I'd say you would look in on the little guy once or twice a year but without ever introducing yourself. Looked rather too much like your dead student, but he was also a reminder of the fox. How did you know? Jiraiya calmed himself a bit. He was giving away too much. The grass ninja had thrown him on the defensive. He didn't need to say anything, admit anything. Why does this matter? Naruto left Hidden Leaf years ago. I haven't seen him in, 7 years? If you're with the Akatsuki and looking for his current location, it'd be the last person to ask. Pharaoh looked amused. Akatsuki, another topic of interest to me. But, let's finish our discussion on Naruto first. Why did you bother to go look at him if you didn't want to help care for him? Jiraiya sighed. Why do you want to know? My reasons are my own, Toad Sage. Answer the question or prepare to starve for the next week. My patience is gone. That broke Jiraiya. It wasn't like he was being asked about village security, he was giving his personal opinions on a kid who'd been missing for 7 years. You're right. I was a bastard. I saw how he lived and how he was treated. It was too hard to look at a tiny Minato and remember I'd never see him again. Pharaoh's smile turned to a neutral stare. I wondered if you would say something like that. I'm not sure I believe it. We'll return to this topic in the future. Why don't we talk about Akatsuki? Let's start with a former member of theirs, Orochimaru. Jiraiya's eyes went wide. He hadn't confirmed that Orochimaru had once belonged. Whoever this grass ninja was, he was very well informed. XXXXXXXXXX. 1 week after returning from Konoha, Taro was summoned before the Grass Ninja Council. Did they want another report? Naruto was back in his laboratory observing and controlling Taro from a distance. He hoped never to need to ride in the belly of a puppet again. The council room was unadorned and plain, as befitted an unpretentious nation like Grass. Taro took a seat at a large round table. Over the next 10 minutes, the senior Jounin of Grass entered and sat down. None of them nodded or smiled at Taro. This wasn't a happy meeting then. The current head of the council, Tenaya, bit his upper lip before speaking. Grass Country's long-standing ninja philosophy is to survive. We stay out of wars. We stay out of alliances. We do our missions and try to make the best possible lives for ourselves. One of our most important techniques is to purposefully not have cage-level ninja associated with our village. We value general strength, not individual strength. Those who hit cage level have stability problems in our experience. We have expelled quite a few. You, Taro or whatever your name really is, are a surprise to us. You were thought strong, not too strong until this business with Orochimaru and then Sasori. You are expelling me from grass country. Taro kept blinking rapidly. This was certainly a surprise. As he considered it, it was not unwelcome. Denaya looked sheepish at such a blunt question. Yes. You were able to wound, possibly kill an S-class ninja. You were tracked down by another one. If you remained here, you would draw all the wrong kinds of attention on us. Taro surveyed the faces of the other jounin on the council. Naruto was trying to think through the implications of his expulsion. On balance, this was a positive. Taro needed to disappear. This could be the beginning move of a series of events in retiring Taro. If I accept this expulsion, I will not be listed in any grass bingo books, correct? Of course. This is an amicable split, Tenaya said. The jounin knew it was dangerous negotiating these types of splits. If this Taro had as much power as it seemed he did, he could level much of this village, and the jounin in the room wouldn't be able to do much about it. If my students were to voluntarily choose to accompany me when I left the village, would they appear in any grass bingo books? Silent looks passed between the jounin on the council. Finally Tenaya seemed prepared to speak. We could arrange that if your genin team wished to leave with you. Good. I think they should be promoted to chunin for their performance in Konoha. Tenaya nodded. We had already approved your recommendation, Taro. Thank you. I will be gone by tomorrow at dusk. Taro made to stand and leave. Tenaya motioned for him to remain seated. There is another issue, a delicate one. With your departure, we feel it would be best for the legendary grass cutter, which you recovered, to remain here in grass country. Can we come to some sort of agreement on this matter? Taro had to smile. These guys had balls. First they kick him out, then they ask him to leave grass country's most valued ninja treasure behind. I think we can, Taro said. What do you have to offer? The council looked equal parts pleased and annoyed. They would regain the treasure, but it was likely to be expensive, very expensive. Taro summoned his students to him. When number 2 went to speak, Taro held up his hand in a halt signal. He led his students outside the village walls and then took off at a dead run. He led his students through 5 large stands of bamboo zigging and weaving all the way for kilometers. He finally slowed as he approached a bolt hole he considered expendable. It would be used for this meeting only and then destroyed. It took 15 minutes to get underground and into the secure room. It had only a table and 4 chairs. Taro beckoned them to take chairs. Awfully cloak and dagger, number 4, number 1 joked. Yes, I apologize. But circumstances have changed for me. I was banished from grass. What? Number 2 hissed. Don't interrupt, please. I said I was banished from hidden grass today. I must leave by tomorrow evening. He held up his hand when number 1 tried to interrupt. It's fine. I can accept their reasoning. If I stay then I might drag Orochimaru and Sasori into conflict with us. So it was a mutual decision, up to a point. I did negotiate a few concessions. I will not be considered a missing ninja. Also, if any or all of you wish to accompany me, you would not be considered missing ninja. If you wish to remain, then you would be promoted to chunin of the grass. Before we leave this safe space today, I must have a decision from each of you. Taro gestured. They were now permitted to speak. But his students were silent for more than a minute. You are banished because you saved us from Orochimaru? Number 3 asked. In part. I am now considered S-rank by the village council and grass never permits S-rank ninjas to remain. I am the 3rd to be expelled for this reason in the last decade. The last was a truly vile ninja called Zetsu. He transformed his body into some sort of plant and he practiced cannibalism. I'm in rather poor company in that regard. What do you plan to do? Number 1 asked. That is the right question to ask. I have quite a few plans, some involving dealing with the snake Sannin. He would never have come to my attention had he not attacked you. I also need to deal with that red-headed boy from Hidden Sand. Beyond that, I can see us developing our own village. During all this I will continue the ninja training we've started and development of more elusive arts. Number 1 looked confused, but it washed off his face. I want to be a great hunter, killing the worst missing ninjas. We only got to do as much of that because we were with you. I don't know that I can accomplish my goals if I remain behind. Taro nodded. Number 1 wanted Taro to promise to help him with his goal. Taro wanted to. He wanted to help sway them, but his students needed to work this out for themselves. They knew their goals. They needed to determine for themselves how best to achieve them. Whether it was with Taro or not was up to them. Number 3 bit at his lip until it bled. I always thought I wanted to be jounin of grass, like my father and my older brother. But I hate the idea that I would be kicked out if I became too powerful. The compressed steam I prefer to use could eventually become an S-rank technique, at least I hope it could. I would hate to achieve so much and then be dismissed like so much trash. Hera looked at number 2. She sighed. I have no reservations about leaving. Be sure. I don't know if grass would take you back if you chose to return, Taro said. The conversation continued for a few more hours, talking it all out. How they would harass Orochimaru to gain experience, where and when they might set up a village. After Naruto was confident in their decisions and loyalty, he decided to take a major risk. I have one final detail to show you. I hope it will not change your decision, but you do deserve to know. Let me just show you. With that, Naruto kicked open the hatch and fell out. A rather inelegant introduction to the students had trained for the last 2 years. His students, who were fairly unflappable, looked aghast. Some boy had just climbed out of their sensei. What was going on? My name is Naruto. I am a puppeteer, like that bastard Sasori. I have been your sensei these years, operating behind the scenes with my good pal, Taro, there. The conversation that sparked lasted well into the evening hours. XXXXXXXXXX. Number 1 turned his silver hair black. Number 2's long hair was now braided and fashioned into a bun of the back of her head. Number 3 had dumped his green-colored clothing for blacks and reds. Each of them had decided to have a ceremonial rebirth after they departed grass. Naruto was gratified they had taken his secret in stride. In public he still rode within Taro, but soon that would need to end. Taro had to have a public disaster of some sort. He had the rough outline of a plan, but the details needed sorting. They moved rapidly south of grass country, eventually to end near wind country. Naruto really had told Gaara that he would track him down and kill the Jinchuriki if he did not present himself for seal enhancements at a particular date and time. It just so happened that Naruto and his students would arrive only 2 days before Gaara was due. When they arrived in river country, Naruto gave his students a brief tour of the sights on their way to the largest civilian village in the country. He missed living here. It was beautiful, peaceful save for that horrifying memory of being attacked by Chunin ninjas years ago. Naruto and his students slept that night in tents. They had a restful day, almost like a vacation. Some of them swam in the river for hours, for fun rather than for training. Taro wandered in the forests he remembered so fondly. They ate a brace of rabbits caught by number 1, roasted over flames with root vegetables found nearby. There was little more satisfying than that. Sleeping out of doors, faces a bit cold, bodies warm from sleeping bags was a wonderful thing. It was a nice evening for all. And then Gaara appeared at 5 o'clock the next morning, hours before the scheduled meet. How had found them, Naruto didn't know. Taro was up within moments of detecting Gaara's rather unique style of chakra. He stood outside while his students dressed. It didn't take long for the sand ninja to traverse the trap field laid by numbers 1 and 4. His sand, even now, aided him. You know how to defeat Mother, Gaara said, pointing at Taro. Help me. Mother has been sleeping, but shall come back eventually. Taro stared at the Jinchuriki. It is good you came. Take off your shirt and lay on the grass in the clearing. I will be instructing my students as I work on your seal. Let me explain what will happen to you as a result. Yes, Gaara said as he knelt down and waited for freedom to come. He had had time to dwell on his mortality and it was a glorious time without Mother whispering to him, goading him. He wanted a different sort of life. I will be adding seals to what was already done to you. Taro bent over and examined the structure on Gaara's back. As had feared, it was a hatchet job. Weak, perhaps intentionally so, dangerously so. Sit up, Gaara. I need to sketch this out on paper first to be sure there are no mistakes. Once a seal like this hits flesh, there is no changing things. What do you intend to do? How will it silence Mother? The 3 former chunin of grass wondered how number 4 heir, Naruto could be so calmly speaking with this crazy ninja. They watched and listened and did not interrupt. I had intended 3 new sealing arrays, but I may need 4 or 5 now. One will end your Biju's ability to access your body or mind. Another will force open the demonic chakra possessed by your Biju and permit you to draw upon it freely. A third seal will assist in purifying the demonic chakra into something you can use without dangerous consequences. Gaara didn't blink while Taro was speaking. He looked like he understood what Taro said, but it was unnerving talking to someone who didn't react, who didn't act at all human. How do you know this? Gaara asked. Naruto had access to his father's research on Biju sealing, but he couldn't admit that. I have made a study of this and have access to much research done over the years. Many of the greatest sealing masters study the Jinchuriki seals precisely because they are so complex and touchy. There are few techniques in the world more complex. Gaara nodded. Would you have come after me as you threatened? Had you not come here, today? It'd have been in your bedroom by this time tomorrow ending your life, little ninja. Do you have any questions about the seals? When will you be ready? Taro pointed to the ground. Sit and be silent for 20 minutes. I should have this done by then. The time passed slowly for the nervous students. Gaara didn't seem to move, at least during that time. Naruto finished his sketch and checked over the final points. He decided to add a fourth seal, based on an item Naruto carried in his seal. It guaranteed that should Gaara die, then all the chakra would instantly bleed into the earth. A Biju dispatched in such a way should never be able to reform. Naruto looked up and saw Gaara staring at him. Naruto did not like the Jinchuriki, but he realized he could just have easily turned into this type of insane, murdering monster. He felt empathy, which was why Gaara was still alive, rather than buried underneath one of Konoha's many forests. Arrow stood up to cross over to where Gaara was sitting when he felt a disturbance in the micro-puppets 1 kilometer away. Someone was approaching quickly from Suna. Does anyone know you are here, Gaara? The redhead shook his head. They would not wish me to meet with a foreign ninja. Arrow nodded at his students. They prepared for a violent confrontation of some sort. Less than a minute later, a Jounin walked slowly out of the nearby forest. He held his hands up in a non-threatening way. Taro had been awkwardly interrogated by this Jounin inside a dive bar in Konoha. He was Gaara's sensei. Gaara, you are needed back in Suna. Wait, Paku. I am consulting with this ninja on some of my problems. Gaara, leave now. Anything you might say to these people would be a state secret. Arrow began walking toward the Suna Jounin. Gaara's presence this day was the cost for me not killing him in Konoha. I intend to fix what your people have left incomplete. In less than an hour, Gaara will have no more mental or bodily interconnection with his Biju. You may not do this. I am acting Kazekage. Do not touch a ninja under my command. Gaara looked at his sensei. Why would you stop this, Paku? I would not have you weaken yourself. I will strengthen myself. I will have the power to help my country rather than terrorize it. Do you not wish this? We have need of your talents, Gaara. Orochimaru betrayed us. He murdered your father, the Kazekage. I would send you against him to destroy him entirely. Gaara breathed slowly for a few moments before he responded. You wish to assign me to a suicide mission, then. Orochimaru can be beaten, but I have not trained to do this. I do not accept. So be it, Paku said, before dispelling. A clone of some sort. Arrow had expected this, but everyone else seemed surprised. The attack came first from the north, a hail of spears. Number 3 let loose with a widely dispersed blast of steam. The spears began to melt, their shapes distorted. Instead of cutting through the air like weapons, they hit wind resistance and sunk like stones. Arrow knew precisely where Paku was, but he wanted to give Gaara a test of his hopefully new ideals. What would Gaara do to a former mentor who now stood in his way? He was a murderer. What were his instincts now that his Biju was temporarily silenced? Rivers of sand erupted from the nearby river and flew outward in every direction. They were hunting deadly prey. Arrow observed the depth of control Gaara possessed over the sand. It was impressive. His crude approximation, with wind affinity chakra, was perhaps 20% of what Gaara could do. It had been good that Gaara and number 3's battle had been, interrupted during the chunin exam finals. Gaara's sand erupted above the treeline to the west. Number 2 ran off to confront this Jounin. Perhaps her common sense was still lacking. Number 1 began making the hand signs for one of his stronger jinjutsus. Number 3 used a hand sign to question Taro. Should I kill him? No, Taro signed back. I wish to observe what Gaara will do. Number 3 hung back, hypervigilant. A few minutes later there was some kind of explosion near to where number 2 and Gaara's sand had concentrated their efforts. Then the sand began to contract, returning to the central point where Gaara stood. Sand was wrapped around Paku like so many thick bandages. Number 2 followed behind the sand mummy. Paku was bleeding from a few wounds, signs of some of number 2's non-lethal attacks. Gaara's sand brought his sensei to a halt a few weeks from where he stood. How did you follow me? Paku looked more than a little terrified at being wrapped in Gaara's sand. You are under constant surveillance, of course. I knocked my watchers unconscious before I left, Gaara said with his emotionless voice. This wasn't going to end well. But the confrontation had given Naruto all the information he needed on Gaara. The redhead's immediate instincts, without mother whispering in his head, hadn't been to slaughter Paku. There was something to work with here. Taro interceded. Paku could be dealt with later, but Gaara's mother could choose to return at any time. If I may, I can put this ninja into a prison of sorts. We can finish up what we came for and Gaara can cart you back to Suna. Gaara nodded finally. Taro scrawled out a quick storage seal and then locked Paku into it. Gaara cradled it for a moment before he dropped it into his sand gourd. Now, you, Gaara, may recline over there. This won't take too long, Taro said. Good. XXXXXXXXXX. Wave Country was far more prosperous than it had been when Naruto first journeyed here to build a safe house. He and his team had settled on basing themselves here for their operations against Hidden Sound. The distance between the two was significant, but it was safer this way. They left on a Wednesday evening and arrived in Sound Friday at dusk. They planned to remain over the weekend, scouting out bases, trying to find where the actual hidden village was located. Kabuto was strangely unhelpful in this regard, as he had never been. Orochimaru had always come to him in order to keep his spy safe. The new line of work agreed with number 1 most of all. He loved the hunter nin calling. He had specifically developed his skill sets with this profession in mind. He couldn't have been more perfectly suited for this unless if he had a bloodline trait of some sort related to tracking. From Friday evening until Monday in the pre-dawn hours, the 4 ninja explored the flat floodplains of Rice Country. They found and destroyed a few guard posts and took the heads of whomever they killed. They found one roving party that reminded Naruto of that raiding party with the bone wielder had fought and killed years earlier. This must have been one of Sound's insurgent parties journeying to other countries. Their heads joined the bounty sack. Not least of all, they took action against the rice. They poisoned every field they passed. They needed to undermine Orochimaru's strength. If he held back opposition, internal and external, with the threat of his personal power and the promise of no more rice shipments, well, it helped weaken Orochimaru if he had little rice to bargain with. The guerrilla war against Hidden Sound had begun. During the morning hours of that Monday, the 4 of them journeyed to Lightning Country and another safe house. They'd rest up for a few days and raid again, this time cutting a swath through Rice over to Waterfall Country. Then the final leg would take everyone back to Wave for a week or more of recuperation time. They'd deal with collecting bounties listed in the bingo books then. This was how they were funding their little plan. Instead of fishing for tuna or eel, they went fishing for ninja. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX exciting. Glad people are enjoying the story. The months after their nearly successful raising of Hidden Leaf were a bad time to belong to the Hidden Sound Village. Those confined to the various hidden facilities within Rice Country or the bases hidden outside the country were safe. However, disappearances among ninja on patrol became uncountable. Production of rice dived. Terrorists were poisoning every rice field they came across. Orochimaru actually tracked their routes through Rice Country by having his ninja survey which rice fields had been poisoned and which hadn't. Any visible structure with a remotely military purpose was torched. It was impossible to predict when or where the terrorists would strike. Orochimaru was being rapidly driven out of his mind. He had a new body, of course, but it wasn't the one he wanted. That grass ninja had destroyed his last host body. This guerrilla warfare was unlike anything that his sensei would ever approve. Had set up ambushes, targets too good to pass up, but these terrorists never bit when Orochimaru was involved. If it was a squad of jounin, the terrorists would kill everyone without leaving any bodies or evidence behind. How could a ragtag group be this good? There was no way this was the work of the Hokage. That fool was all about protecting civilians and minimizing collateral damage. In these raids, the main starch for many, if not most, of the elemental nations was being cut to shreds. Orochimaru had depended upon the rice upon using it as a bargaining chip to keep people from invading. He would threaten to destroy the rice and the starving nations would relent. But his rice was gone. Terrorists. Guerrillas. Seiken, the snake Sannin yelled. His sole remaining member of the Sound Four walked cautiously into the room. My lord. We need a richer target, something that looks and smells like a trap, but is so tantalizing that these terrorists won't be able to resist. There is little left, my lord, except for our secure facilities. Orochimaru sighed. Fine, if I must sacrifice a building to kill this plague, I must. Order Structure 7 emptied. Those experiments have been performing poorly. Get our trapping experts in. We know that they like to destroy structures, so we'll counterbomb them. Anyone who sets foot in there will not be coming out again. Seiken nodded. It will be as you command, my lord. Orochimaru sat in a concrete bunker all by himself. He had a lot to consider. The terrorists, the Hidden Leaf mocking him by not being a burned ruin but then also the last Uchiha. Orochimaru would need a new body soon and his present vessel was less than ideal because that stupid grass ninja forced an early switch on him. He had almost 3 years before he could make the leap but the Uchiha should be ready for recruitment now. The boy would have his uses, perhaps as a recruiting tool. Orochimaru needed more warm bodies for his ninja forces maybe, this Sasuke would be good for something beside his eyes. XXXXXXXXXX. Arrow sat in the small cell where had relocated Kabuto. Jiraiya and a few other acquisitions were held in other bolt holes. Naruto didn't have a safe haven like Grass Country any longer. Arrow had sat in the cell with Kabuto for nearly an hour before speaking. It unnerved the former ninja. Orochimaru is taking heavy losses, Kabuto. What will he do? The spy's information was quite out of date, but the young ninja had spent a good deal of time working with Sasori and Orochimaru. He had a decent conception of what both ninja were likely to do. Taro had spent many hours posing hypotheticals to Kabuto. He will strike when you least expect. Kabuto's voice was hoarse from disuse. Taro's lips pursed. Me and my team always expect him to strike. Could you be more helpful? He will attempt to lure you into complacency. You'll blow through something and hell just pop out and slaughter you. That's what he does best. Arrow tapped his fingers on the stone floor. Traps rely on the trapped party being unaware of them. How will Orochimaru lead wary prey into a trap? Temptation. It's his hallmark. Some he tempts with offers of power, others he tempts with more unusual offerings. You would destroy him given the chance. I believe he will try to tempt you with himself or one of his chief lieutenants. Hell spread the word that he'll be in such and such a place and he will. But your assassination attempt will fail and his won't. Pharaoh laughed. You'd best hope he fails, little spy. If I die, then it will take you 2 or 3 weeks to starve to death in here. You'll never leave this place unless I personally take you out. Kabuto said nothing. Taro often taunted him like this. In truth, it terrified Kabuto whenever his captor left and whenever he returned. He was powerless now, and the psychological torture was beginning to have its effect. Kabuto had been imprisoned for months now. Taro never beat him or threatened violence. He didn't need to. Kabuto, you've told me that Hidden Sound was conceived of as a series of hardened underground bunkers. Any ideas as to where Orochimaru might hide them? The silver-haired former ninja shook his head. I was not told precisely in case I was captured. The old snake is paranoid, but for good reason. That made sense. Orochimaru is publicly a ninja village leader in Rice Country. What percentage of Hidden Sound do you think he based elsewhere? Kabuto smiled. If I were a betting man, I'd say that Rice Country holds just a bit more than half of whatever Orochimaru built. Taro nodded. He, too, assumed Orochimaru had major bases in other countries. Did you ever learn anything about the rotation schedule? Rotation? Between the facilities. Ah, yes. I remember. Orochimaru did once explain that he rarely spent more than 2 nights in the same place before moving on. I doubt he forced all of his subordinates to follow the same rules. No, I suspect that most of the staff stays for long periods at a single facility, especially those working on Orochimaru's experiments. Too difficult to pack them up. So, it would be hard to just follow a single ninja or a group of them from facility to facility. It might have been easier prior to the invasion of Hidden Leaf, but now Orochimaru is in full paranoia. Many kilometers away in a different safe house, Naruto manipulated his Taro puppet and considered his options. Orochimaru had to go. But how, that was the question, how? Kabuto was growing less and less useful as he remained apart from his former master. It sounded cold, but Naruto was trying to think of another use for the former ninja. Something appropriate and useful. XXXXXXXXXX. Pharaoh led a battle group of numbers 1, 2, and 3, plus 8 more puppets controlled by Naruto from a remote location. The whole crew been extremely careful for the last 2 raids and it saved their necks. Orochimaru had been waiting for the raiders at 2 different locations they'd tried to attack. The raiders had advanced warning each time and escaped without incident. The chakra strings connecting Naruto to his puppets were far more sensitive to foreign chakra than most ninja were. Especially to a chakra that felt as foul as Orochimaru's did. Tonight, however, Taro and the entire group were returning to attack an installation they'd tried to hit once before. Naruto didn't feel any of Orochimaru's nasty chakra through his chakra strings. The team kept advancing. It was obviously a trap, but the question was the trap powered up and waiting for them this time? The entire party had brought the strongest long-range weapons they had in their arsenals. With any luck, they could lob in a devastating attack and be gone within 45 seconds. If this facility we were in so potentially dangerous, Naruto would prefer to send in spies to see if Orochimaru had left any clues to the locations of his other facilities. Given the circumstances, that was a suicide mission. Naruto cold trisket. Taro made the hand signals to get into position. The attack began as expected. Taro and his students hung back while the other puppets went to a mid-range position. They launched the first volley of mortar rounds. Number 3 used a wide-area steam attack to detonate the mortars above the structure. The blast and its shockwave caved in the hardened structure's roof. The other munitions would be simpler to get inside now. As numbers 1 and 2 prepared to launch a few volleys of ever-burning fluid into the gaping roof holes, Naruto felt the briefest presence of foreign chakra. He prompted Taro to withdraw everyone, but the attack was already on them. Orochimaru, who must have been suppressing his chakra for a good long while, led the attack on the mid-range attackers, all of them puppets. 3 of the 8 were cleaved in half before Naruto could respond. A few of the others were on fire. Naruto made the decision to sacrifice these puppets in order to hide the fact that they were puppets. On another part of the field, Taro and his students were fending off lesser ninja, but the numbers game was against them. They were 4 slightly surprised ninja against perhaps 20 ninja who had patiently prepared this ambush. A rain of weapons erupted from behind them. Number 3 tried to gust them away or melt them. It mostly worked. Taro had to bat one away. Number 2 ducked and then twisted. She ran off to where the fiercest barrage of attacks came from. Taro bounded off to his left. Numbers 1 and 3 turned and began attacking the center of the field. Screams and yells told them they were hitting, but perhaps not disabling or killing. Naruto, back in his safe house, knew he didn't have time to be angry at this turn of events. He absolutely knew that Orochimaru was going to try something like this. Had deferred this attack quite a few times, but Orochimaru had adjusted enough to lure them in. He just needed to keep his students safe. Then he could think about new tactics. Back on the field of battle, number 2 was engaged with 2 opposing ninja. One threw round electricity as if it were free. The other seemed to twist and twirl as if his bones were made from rubber. They were likely the most difficult opponents she had ever faced alone. She turned to her curse touch technique, yet another perversion of medical procedure. She managed to evade the electricity user's attack. Her fist slammed into her enemy's shoulder. Within a second, the skin blackened and began to wither. The muscle rotted before her eyes. The bone weakened and turned to dust. That ninja dropped to the ground as part of his body died. The rubber ninja did not react to his colleague's pain. Rather, he intensified his attacks on number 2. She had never seen someone move the way he did. Never. She aimed for his head and got air. She aimed for the center of his torso, and the man curved away. She tried technique after technique. The ninja kept avoiding everything. Down where Orochimaru was attacking, the tide was turning against the ambushers. Naruto used his chakra strings to set these puppets into a suicide move. Only 3 were still at all mobile, but it was enough. The others still had seals inside them that could aid in this attack. 2 of the least damaged puppets jumped and grabbed at Orochimaru's guards. The puppet missing an arm locked his remaining arm around the ninja's leg. The puppet that had been heavily burned was able to get both arms around another ninja. Miles away, Naruto twitched his finger. Orochimaru's bodyguards went up in a massive explosion. All 10 of the puppet seals detonated. Orochimaru was flung into the air, but managed to turn and ride his body. He stuck to a tree with his feet rather than slamming into it. It took the snake San a moment to feel the pain. Then he saw that his left arm was on fire. He had a half-melted kunai stuck in his leg. He did a few quick jutsu, shook his head, and wondered what kind of ninja would do that, commit suicide like that. These terrorists got more and more interesting and irritating every time Orochimaru looked into them. In another part of the battle, number 2 dodged again as the rubber ninja went on the offensive. He had 5 kunai in his hand and was jabbing everywhere at the same time. Number 2 leapt back. The rubber ninja was gone. She pivoted to her left and that's when she felt it. A kunai sunk into her stomach. The pain was worse than anything she'd ever felt before. As she began to fall backwards, she slashed out with her curse touch and caught an unsuspecting rubber ninja on each leg. Number 2 saw the rapid spread of blood leaking everywhere, all over the ground. Her blood. But she had to smile. Whatever pain she felt right now was a tenth of what the other guy was feeling. A bleeding stomach, perforated intestines, a few nicked minor arteries. Her sensei would save her or she would die. It was best to go out in battle. It was a glorious death, should Kami forsake her. In the now stilled part of the battlefield, number 3 and Taro caught up with number 1 after their attackers were incapacitated. "Where's number 2? Taro asked. Number 1 nodded off to a section of the battlefield. Taro jumped his way through the dense vegetation. He saw his bleeding student a few moments. Miles away, Naruto positively howled in anger. He wanted to protect his students, to make them strong. He did not want them to die in such a way. Taro knelt down and scooped up number 2. She wasn't conscious. Taro hopped away. Numbers 1 and 3 looked surprised at seeing 2 so hurt. Normally she was the one who patched up their minor problems. Taro set her down and began trying to fix the wound to see if he could stop the blood. To see if he could keep his student alive. A minute later, she was stabilized as well as could be managed. The 3 healthy ninja leapt out of their almost fatal attack site. No one spoke. They were all moving at top speed. The nearest safe house was a considerable distance away. Akara woke once. Everything hurt. She tried to open her eyes, but she cold. She tried again and this time whatever muck held them shut gave way. She wasn't outside anymore. She didn't see that horrible rubber ninja. Her teammates or her sensei must have come for her. She tried to turn her head, but that hurt too. What had happened to her that everything hurt? Then she felt it. Her skin was on fire, her stomach felt like it was going to burst. "Oh Kami." Number 2 groaned in pain. Then Taro number 4 came into view. And Naruto, the blonde boy who was so handsome, so strong. Her sensei was here in person and was operating his puppet at the same time. She felt grateful and nervous that so much help was necessary for her. They were doing something to her. Number 3 was at her feet. Number 1 was holding down her head. The pain, it hurt worse. Didn't any of them learn any medical jutsu? It felt like they were tearing her apart. Her eyes fixed on Naruto. He was looking at her. He was terrified. She kept staring up at him, hoping, praying. As the blackness whirled at the edge of her field of vision, she could only think of Naruto. She had gone from being an idiot student to a powerful ninja because of him. She had left her home and her family behind without a thought because he asked it. She had walked and run and swam from one end of the elemental countries because he asked it. If she survived this, if she lived, she would tell her sensei how she felt about him. She had counted on him to save her and he did. He was always there, always strong, always a pillar in her heart. She swore to herself. Let me live so that I can grow stronger for my sensei, so that I can be what he needs from me. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto walked over to the bed where his student was recuperating. He had felt so guilty about her injuries that he set her up after field triage in the safe house he currently inhabited. It had been 3 days. She looked better and was drinking fluids. But she was still awfully pale. This whole thing was a vivid reminder of one of the main benefits of serving a ninja village. Proper medical services. Everything had been cobbled together. She had nearly died twice because Naruto and his team didn't know what they were doing and didn't have basic supplies. Her bandages were stolen from a clinic in the nearby village. The antibiotics were stolen from a veterinarian. The jutsu used to repair some of the damage had also been stolen, much earlier, from Hidden Leaf. It was sheer audacity that number 2 was still alive. She was their primary healer. Naruto only had rudimentary healing skills and number 3 was scarcely any better. Number 1 knew as much as any civilian hunter out in the woods. Naruto sat on a stool and looked at the girl's easy breathing. She was finally sleeping well. They'd kept infection out, even though her intestines had been cut. Number 2 was very lucky, foolhardy but very lucky. Naruto looked over the saline drip. It would need to be changed within the hour. He made to stand up when a hand snaked out and grasped his. "You are awake," Naruto said. "I was tired of sleeping," number 2 said. "Your body needs the time and energy to heal. Stop lecturing. I know you've never taken to the healing arts." Naruto smiled. "True enough. But I've had my fair share of injuries. Some heal slowly, some never heal at all." His student still didn't know about his main weakness, his missing leg. That Naruto would keep hidden for as long as possible. "It'll be good as new, number 4. Naruto was confused for a moment. His student had known his true name for some time now, but she had never used that name. If she addressed him by name, she said, "Taro. Is there anything I can get you? I have several jutsu scrolls you've never seen before. I won't allow you to practice them, but you can read them." Number 2 smiled. "That sounds nice. My brain feels like it's rotting." Naruto stood up and walked into his sleeping quarters. He kept a stash of scrolls there. It took just a few minutes to find a few interesting scrolls. Naruto walked back to the room where his student was staying. "Here you are. Thank you. Would you do me another favor, number 2? Naruto shrugged. "Sure. What can I do?" "Call me Makurin, sensei." That took Naruto back. It wasn't her true name. The Jounin council back in Grass had informed Naruto of the name of each of his students. But he had never used them and he didn't know what this new name meant. She wasn't delicate like the flower name she had just adopted. She was stronger than the thickest tree in the forest. "I will call you number 2. Please, sensei. Call me Makurin." Naruto leaned away from his student. Something was going on here. Something odd, something off. He was caught off guard when number 2's hand reached out and snagged Naruto's hand. She had his hand to her lips before he could react. It felt strange. Warm, wet. The lips on his hand were the first time had been touched by another human in a long, long time. Doctors teaching him to use his prosthesis in Hidden Leaf. That soon a ninja who had kicked Naruto out of an early model Taro puppet. Ears. Naruto blinked twice, 3 times. Then he remembered the lips, the aggressive lips, on his hand. He snatched his hand back. "What are you doing? Sensei. Sensei, we're alone." "Number 2, I don't know what you want." "I want you, Naruto. I thought you were so cool and powerful when I just saw your Taro puppet, it'd have followed you anywhere. I owe you so much. I admired and respected you, but you're my age. You're beautiful. I don't just have to admire you, sensei. I want you, Naruto. I want to be yours." Naruto's brain almost shut down at that declaration. No one had ever claimed to love him, to want him. Naruto didn't know what to do. He was so advanced as a ninja, but his mind had never turned to girls. He thought of himself as broken, as damaged. This didn't make any sense. "I don't understand, number 2. She sat up in bed. Naruto wanted to push her back down so she wouldn't injure her stitches and then he thought again. He wanted to get away from this girl who was causing his head so much pain. He didn't understand. It didn't make sense. She reached out to grab his hand again. "Please, sit back down. You're going to re-injure yourself, number 2. "No. Let me explain. My fondness for you, my admiration had turned to love, Naruto. Now, you're nursing me back to health. I can't imagine anything more romantic." Naruto stood up and headed for the door. "He'll be back in an hour. Read your scrolls, number 2. We shall not speak of this again." He was gone before number 2 could say anything. She spent the next hours sobbing. XXXXXXXXXX. Time passed slowly in Naruto's current stronghold. Numbers 1 and 3 didn't stay long before fleeing back out into the field. They could feel the tension even if they didn't understand it. Naruto took to climbing inside his tarot puppet and leaving on missions with numbers 1 and 3. He left a shadow clone behind to tend to number 2. No one said anything but it all unraveled. Years of working together was gone. The comfort of being a team was disrupted. They were back to their raw genin days. Attacks against Rice Country targets slowed to a halt. Naruto's plan to fully blood his students and himself slowed. Before he could truly become strong as had promised to do, he needed to perfect his present skills. But if he couldn't keep his students safe, if he couldn't fulfill his obligations to them, if he couldn't even stand to be touched, then what value was power? It was a most uncomfortable month. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto managed to resume their raiding 5 weeks after number 2 had been injured. His female student refused to look at Naruto or the tarot puppet. They began the raid, but no one was really into it. The magic was gone. Indeed, in the 13 hours they traveled between wave and lightning, the only highlight was running into some kind of caravan of sound ninjas, carting the last Uchiha, Sasuke, off to meet with Orochimaru. Ero stayed his team while he deployed a special series of micro-puppets, the ones that carried a special poison developed by Kabuto. Here, finally, was a worthy test subject. An Uchiha being willingly led away from Hidden Leaf. Sasuke didn't seem to notice the pain of a few micro-puppets, injecting him with a small dose of an optic nerve poison. Ero gestured for his team to attack, but he singled Sasuke out for safe passage. The poison took time to take hold. Naruto wanted to know the true effects. Sasuke would live today, who knew what tomorrow had in store for him. Ero signaled. The brutal attack rained down on the sound ninja. Number 2 held nothing back. She used every horrifying, lethal type of medical perversion she could think of. Arms exploded, hearts and lungs liquefied, gashes self-cauterized themselves across torsos. Number 3 showed just why he would eventually be classed an S-rank ninja. Within a few years his repertoire would be well known and feared. Skin burned, ninjas were cut in half from a great distance, steam batted powerful ninjas around like they were toy ships in a storm. Number 1 preferred to demonstrate his sword and dagger skills on a night like this one. He hadn't been on the field long enough to prepare any significant traps, but he had a few quick surprises ready. He was about to test out some new types of distraction traps when 2 wounded ninjas managed to grab Sasuke and flee the field. Ero signaled that they wouldn't be pursuing. He had a test to run, after all. He wanted to see the effects of the new poison on the Sharingan. Hours later the group arrived at the safe house in Lightning Country. Naruto crawled out of Taro. He expected to have to explain about his order concerning the Uchiha. Instead, number 2 dropped a bombshell. The Uchiha was the last of their concern. "This was my last mission, sensei. I believe I have learned everything you have to teach me." Her voice was strained and brittle. "No, number 2. I am sure there is more that all of us can help you with." "No," number 2 said more firmly. "I have learned everything that I want to from you. I need to map my own course now." Numbers 1 and 3 were surprisingly quiet. They had both wondered what had happened between numbers 2 and 4, but whatever it was seemed to be playing itself out now. The crumbling of their team was now complete. "Is there anything I can do," Naruto asked, "to change your mind?" Number 2 bit her lip and shook her head. "I made myself clear to you. It's too hard to be here now." Naruto looked sad, but he nodded. As much as he wanted number 2 to remain, he couldn't countenance what she seemed to want from him. If this was what she needed, then Naruto had to let her go. "What are your plans, number 2? "I will return and visit my parents for a time. Beyond that, I do not know. I have no interest in returning to serve grass. They were wrong then to expel you, they remain wrong now." Number 1 stepped over to whisper to number 2. Number 3 looked upset, but he let the others figure it out. "Then go with my blessing, my dear student. This will likely be a complete severing of ties, then. With your departure, I will have to destroy the safe houses you know about for our continued security." "I know, sensei. I would never speak of you, but it is sensible in any case. Thank you number 2. More than setting up new bolt holes, other things will have to change soon. This life I live will soon be gone, number 2. Once you leave, I don't know that we'll ever run into each other again. That's alright. It's too hard staying here, ignoring reality. You helped make me strong and for that I am thankful. But you broke my heart, sensei. I cannot just overlook that. I have to find my own path now." 20 minutes later, after saying goodbye to her teammates but not hugging or touching her former sensei, number 2 left the safe house. Naruto suspected and feared that he would never see his student again. The truth would be far worse. XXXXXXXXXXX. AN. This is my long-planned exploration of number 2. Those who complained about not knowing the students' names now have one of them. Most of the S-rank ninja featured in Naruto seemed to have psychiatric dysfunctions. Naruto, growing up the way he did and always hiding inside puppets, is just as broken as Hakuya Sasori. His power, like all power, comes at a severe cost. He seems willing to pay it even if all the people around him are not. Or crumbling to come. The golden age is over. Amayana Kara let herself discreetly into her parents' home in grass country. She didn't want anyone to know she was back. Mom? There was a noise from the upstairs. Kara ghosted upstairs. Her mother was cleaning the floor. Kara. What are you doing here? I thought you were off training. Kara's mother was a civilian. She didn't understand the things Kara explained. Had she been a ninja, seeing her daughter like this would have been alarming. I'm fine, Mom. I decided to part ways with my sensei. Oh. He didn't try to take advantage of you, did he? A bitter laugh erupted from Kara's body. No, nothing like that. Okay. I'm making my special ramen tonight. Would you like to stay? Yes, Mom. I'd like to stay. May I remain here for a few days? Kara's mother smiled. Yes. I would love that. Where's Dad? Trying to trade our old equipment for some better implements. Kara's family had been farming for generations. Daikon, sweet potato, onion, eggplant, and a variety of other vegetables. The conditions weren't great for growing rice here. The pair began talking about safe topics. Kara's mom didn't understand enough to ask about ninja topics and, for the time being, Kara didn't care to speak about her work. It was nice to just have a simple conversation, to remember simpler times. XXXXXXXXXX. The unusual ninja who looked more like a plant than a person grinned when he performed a routine check on the Tamayana farm. The girl was eating dinner with an older woman and man, the parents. Sasori had asked Zetsu to conduct surveillance on a number of locations in and around grass country. This was the first hit. Sasori needed to know immediately. He had most urgent questions for this girl. Perhaps the other students were home on leave, too. Zetsu had a long night ahead of him. XXXXXXXXXX. Number 1 spent less and less time around Naruto and number 3. It seemed that number 2 had been the glue that held everything together. Alternately, number 3 became more focused in his training. Naruto tried spending more time with his remaining students, time spent interacting with them directly, not through Taro or another puppet. It felt strange, unworldly to be in the room with someone who wasn't a subject for interrogation. Everything felt so wrong now. He had an emptiness in his chest. Naruto found he actually missed his student. But he didn't know what to do. So he threw himself into training. He upped his practice schedule. He spent an hour a day practicing his taijutsu while he controlled 10 puppets battling each other. He refined and improved his puppetry innovations. He got sharper, faster, better. Still, it hurt. XXXXXXXXXX. The ghostly images of a number of people hung in the air. Sasori was alone in his safe house. He had left that pest Dara elsewhere. Leader, I have news. Enlighten us, Sasori. It will be of interest to Itachi and Kisame. The supposed grass jounin I've been tracking for some time is actually our missing Kyuubi container. That got the ghostly images moving and talking. Nothing had been heard of Uzumaki Naruto for some time, not even by Itachi, who was formerly an Anbu captain in Hidden Leaf. Quiet, the leader commanded. Very tantalizing, Sasori. Could you provide us with some more details? Gladly. I made the acquaintance of a young woman who was one of this jounin students. Our arrangement together provided me with some interesting facts, although the man's location is not one of them. Stop blathering, Kisame said. Spit it out. How can this jounin who knocked around Orochimaru be the Kyuubi container? Sasori smiled. Naruto is a puppeteer, of course. He can appear in any guise he wishes. Apparently the puppets he makes are good enough to pass as human, or he independently recreated my human puppet technique. The puppeteer, leader said. That is disturbing. It would indicate he has superb chakra control, if nothing else, in ninja skills. I was under the impression, Itachi, that the boy was reviled in his village. Sasori, did this information source know who trained him? She did not. Indeed, she did not know her sensei was a teenager until a few months ago. Keiji, this boy of ours. It was only sheer good luck we have this much information. Had he not confronted Orochimaru, or had my spy network been less effective, we might never have known this. Enough, Itachi said. I'll pat your back all you wish the next time I see you. For now, tell me where I can find this puppeteer. What does he look like? What are his vulnerabilities? Sasori laughed. Nervous, eh, Itachi? A few of your greatest techniques won't work against a puppet. No Tsukuyomi, eh? Sasori, leader warned. Do not taunt. My source told me that Naruto was destroying all the safe houses she knew about. They ranged throughout the elemental countries. What of his techniques? Kisame asked. Keiji on that. The student could only talk of what the puppets could do. The main puppet is quite a weapons user. But the things she described are not enough to drive off and then severely wound someone like Orochimaru. Has obviously hidden his true power from even his students. Itachi nodded. It sounds like this one will be a challenge. Good, I like a strong ninja. I need to find a true measure of my strength. Perhaps this boy will provide it. The leader seemed less pleased. Somehow the Nine Tails has learned a powerful hidden art. We don't know how or precisely what he does. It's strong enough to inconvenience our old colleague. The only image we have of him is of his puppet, and that blasted thing can be abandoned at any time. What are you holding back, Sasori? This former grass jounin has been the one harassing and devastating Orochimaru, and I doubt he'll be satisfied until Orochimaru is dead. Leader nodded. Good. This Naruto will have to pass through Rice Country with some frequency. Kisame and Itachi, you will go and greet our missing Jinchuriki. Greet him gently. Sasori, be sure your acquaintance is appropriately thanked for her assistance. Already done, my leader. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto was sure he was about to lose number 1. He decided to confront the issue after they finished this raid. Their efforts were less and less successful. Hidden sound was just too well hidden. But number 3 had suggested an interesting new tactic. They're called hidden sound, right? Well, why don't we see if we can find them with sound, had asked. This was their first test of that interesting question. Naruto had worked up an earth-style technique to send sound waves at high speed through stone and earth. Upon encountering a gap, whether a small rabbit warren or an underground building, the sound reverberated violently, causing the space to collapse. In theory, Naruto and his team should be able to see the earth bulge and then sink into the ground. It was an interesting concept, but who knew if it would work? The group stopped in 4 densely packed areas of vegetation, all places easy to conceal an underground entrance. The jutsu turned up nothing the first time, and only a few small explosions the second and third times, explosions far too small to be installations. The 4th place they stopped revealed something else. A stand of vegetation erupted in a cloud of dust. Direct hit. Within seconds, Naruto, inside Taro, and his 2 remaining students moved closer to the detonation site, but they all took up different untouched sections. Each of them performed the jutsu again. After moving another time and using the jutsu again, they had a good sense of the size of the facility that they had just discovered. Number 3, why don't you see how well your steam can clean out a nest of cockroaches? My pleasure, number 4. The powerful ninja ran toward the nearest edge of the facility and began blowing out a perilously long stream of steam. It pushed straight down. Wisps of steam erupted from other damaged parts of the facility. As he turned red in the face and had sweat pouring off his face, number 3 stopped his attack. Whatever had been inside the structure was now thoroughly cooked. Number 3 looked pleased with himself, but number 1 looked confused. Naruto ended the experiment then. He needed to talk with number 1 in a safe place. He didn't care to lose another person he had come to care about. As dawn lit the sky, the team arrived in the far south of Fire Country. The bolt hole was new, one of a half-dozen recently carved out to replace the ones abandoned after number 2's departure. Number 3 went to eat a quick meal and find a dark corner to sleep in. Naruto clambered out of Taro and then tagged number 1. May I speak with you? Sure thing, number 4. Naruto gestured to a pair of chairs. He poured himself a glass of water and offered another to his student. They both drank in silence before Naruto could form the questions he wanted to ask. I wonder if you are learning what you need to from me, from this association. Number 1 shrugged. I remember that you wish to become a hunter nin. From what you've said of your family, I suppose you wish to honor their memory doing this. That earned Naruto a sharp nod. Yes. A band of thugs, led by a middling missing ninja from Hidden Cloud, killed my parents. Yes, I do this to avenge them. These raids seemed like good training at first, but now, we're hunting for a handful of needles in a haystack the size of a small country. I believe my growth has leveled off. I see. Is there anything I can do to help you? Number 1 sucked in breath and sighed. I don't know. I don't think so. Are you thinking of moving on? Number 1 nodded. You liked her, didn't you? Number 1 tried to look surprised. Who? He didn't play clueless very well. It doesn't matter, Naruto said. I promised to help you. I stand by that promise, number 1. Thank you. I know that, but this isn't the same thing anymore. I never thought how much I liked my team. The others in my academy class just moaned and groaned about their teammates. I graduated at the bottom of the rankings and didn't have any room to bitch. I was from civilian stock, I had no reason to expect to become a ninja. But then we had something magical, the 4 of us. With number 2, I could almost read her mind in a combat situation. Naruto smiled. Until I took you as my students, I had never thought about teamwork. But it amazed me every day what you 3, together, could achieve. Please let me know what I can do. If I need to let you go, then tell me that. I need to leave, sensei. Then you may go. Rest up as long as you need. If number 3 remains, then we will have to set up new safe houses again. I am sorry to cause you the disruption. Naruto waved away the apology. Never apologize for trying to achieve your dreams, my student. If you think of anything I can do to help before you leave, please let me know. Number 1 won't meet Naruto's eyes. He just nodded, finished off his water, and grabbed a sleeping bag. Naruto did not sleep well that night. He feared for number 1. Hunter nins, especially those driven by a sense of vengeance, didn't usually last that long working solo. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto rode inside his Taro puppet, walking behind number 3. They were getting in position to run another series of nighttime raids against Hidden Sound. They had a map and were carefully checking Hidden Sound and marking off the grid state touched. So far they uncovered and destroyed 6 more underground bunkers. The end was drawing near for Orochimaru. His ninja were decimated. His food was destroyed. His economic base was gutted. Unpaid armies don't fight after all. Now his hardened facilities were falling one by one. The Snake Sannin would have to return to the field to confront Naruto, and this time, the Snake Sannin won't be leaving alive. Number 3 was moving at a good clip until he suddenly stopped. He then leapt off into the vegetation. He screamed. Naruto looked, there was something over there. Something rather close to a former bolt hole Naruto had used. It looked like a stunted tree or something. Arrow closed a distance, but Naruto almost lost control of his puppet when he understood what he was looking at. This cannot go unpunished. Number 4. Number 3's anger had already morphed into resolve. Naruto looked at the horrible thing. It wasn't a stunted tree at all. It was a pole planted in the ground. A bleached skull mounted on top. There was a horrible red scorpion carved or burnt into the forehead. Even though the face was gone, eaten by birds or insects, Naruto knew it had to be number 2. The clothing at the base of the pole matched what his student liked to wear. In that moment of realization, number 2 was dead. Naruto's fear of Akasuna no Sasori disappeared. The scorpion was dead. He just didn't know it yet. Thanks for watching.